The story deepens as the PGMOL release a statement regarding responses to the weekend's action. Transfer hopes are on the increase as there is now just a week remaining until the end of the window, and plenty more to discuss in today's Arsenal Transfer Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is our Arsenal Transfer Show. Joining you this morning for the final time here, the surroundings that are around me. I'll be leaving the west side of England very, very shortly after this morning's show, which is going to be a shorter episode because of that. Again, I hope that you can see me. I hope you can hear me clearly. I hope that everything is coming through as fine as it feasibly can be. Tomorrow morning, you're going to be getting a pre-recorded episode with a special guest, as I will be at the airport traveling to Spain, to Barcelona, looking, of course, ahead to the fixture against Girona in the Champions League. Very much looking forward to that as well. So it's all go. You're not going to get me back in the usual studio settings until Friday morning, believe it or not. It's a very, very hectic few days here in TGT Central. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you could drop a like, if you could subscribe, that would be very much appreciated as well. Good morning to Blackshine, to Barry, to Glenn, Steve, Morgie, Matt G, Tom, Grantley Poos. We've got Southport Gooner. We've got who else? We've got Knowledge. We've got Matt G, Shari, Steve, Martin. Plenty more of you guys and girls in the chat box as well. The internet this morning has been particularly bad, so I'm afraid I don't have slides for you because it was taking forever. We do have some banners, though, which I'll throw up on the stream for you so you know which part of the show we are talking about. So in terms of a roundup of the latest Premier League action, of course, all of Saturday's results: Bournemouth 5-0 against Forest, Brighton against 1-0 against Everton, Liverpool 4-1 against Ipswich, Southampton losing 3-1 against Newcastle, Arsenal beating Wolves 1-0, and Chelsea losing 3-1 at Manchester City. Yesterday's results, very intriguing indeed. Brentford 2-1 winners over Crystal Palace, went 2-0 up in that game before being pegged back late on, but held on for the 3 points. Spurs, goodness gracious me, a home defeat to Leicester. It just feels like a ticking time clock, if you like, until Ange Postecoglou leaves, but there's suggestions that they are still going to stick with him despite all of the poor results. You know, they have injuries. We have injuries. Arsenal finds themselves second in the table. Spurs sitting very close to a relegation scrap. And when people say, well, injuries are no excuse. Well, some clubs like Arsenal are dealing with their injuries as best as they feasibly can and still sit in a competitive position in the league. Others are falling and falling and falling. Aston Villa dropped points in their hopes of a race towards the Champions League and European places, drawing 1-1 with West Ham United. And Fulham losing, should have probably drawn this game, but lost late on against Manchester United 1-0. Sandro Martinez arguably lucky to still be on the field. How that leaves the table? Well, Spurs, as I mentioned, are down in 15th place on 24 points. Arsenal are 23 points ahead of Tottenham, sitting in second. They are 6 points off of Liverpool, who have played a game less than them. Nottingham Forest have dropped 3 points behind them now. Manchester City have moved up to fourth position on 41 points. Newcastle also on 41 points. Chelsea, losing that game, dropped down to sixth in the table, level on points with seventh placed Bournemouth. And Aston Villa, eighth in the league on 37 points, 10 points now behind Arsenal. Brighton, with their recent defeat, they're on 34 points. Fulham, also losing, means they're in 10th on 33 points. Brentford move up to 11th in the league on 31 points. Manchester United also moving up to a mighty 12th in the table on 29 points. Crystal Palace sitting on 13th in 27 points. It is not looking particularly good. Leicester out of the relegation zone, 17th on 17 points as well. In terms of the reaction to the game at the weekend with Arsenal beating Wolves and, of course, that controversial red card for Miles Lewis-Skelly, there has been a couple of developments here. There's suggestions that the PGMOL are backing the statement, or rather not the statement, but they're backing the decision. Arsenal will need to appeal that decision for that to be kind of looked at and potentially overturned. But the suggestions are at the moment that that decision is being backed, despite all of the backlash in response to it. But the PGMOL have also released a statement in the aftermath of that game. We are appalled by the threats and abuse directed at Michael Oliver following the Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Arsenal fixture. No official should be subject to any form of abuse, let alone the abhorrent attacks aimed at Michael and his family over the past 24 hours. The police are aware and a number of investigations have commenced. We are supporting Michael and all those affected and are determined to tackle this unacceptable behaviour. Sadly, this is not the first time a match official has been forced to deal with threats in recent times. We will continue to support all investigations. So, what do we say about this? Well, first of all, we obviously condemn all of the horrendous abuse that has been directed in the direction of Michael Oliver. At no point is abuse of any form ever justified whatsoever. And that is always where you have to say and stand on that front. No matter what you think of the decision, no matter what you think of what's going on, abuse to people's families and beyond is never acceptable. And these people, I sincerely hope, get the treatment that absolutely is worthy of what they have said and done in this scenario. However, and I hate doing the buts, I hate doing the howevers, I hate doing the things like this because it is really awful. My problem is, and where I sit, is that, and I'll read you our good friend of the show, Elliot from the Arsenal Vision podcast, who quote tweeted that statement. Elliot tweeted, absolutely no right-thinking person believes that kind of behaviour is acceptable. But this is a sclerotic and incompetent organisation using victimhood to shift focus away from their incompetence and alleged corruption, and it's entirely transparent. We aren't falling for it. I empathise with that point of view. You know, there's been far less suggestion and talk around the decision in itself, and there's been suggestions that decision is going to be upheld when we could all see how ridiculous that decision was. Time and time again, decisions are going against Arsenal that are not being upheld in any other game and are consistently being seen to see different responses in other games despite that situation happening in other games. It's mental that we are having to deal with this. It doesn't mean that you should be abusing the officials or even those behind the PGMOL. That's not the way that we deal with this, certainly detracting from it. We have seen situations like this happen where there's ridiculous decisions come out and then subsequently we have seen abusive messages sent and no statement put out. It's also worth pointing that out. The statement has been put out in response to this incident. We know that every single week this is going on as well. I can't help, and I don't want to, but I can't help that because of the inconsistency of when these statements are also put out, there is something to be had in terms of the discussion surrounding that as well. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. Condemn the abuse, of course, but do not lose sight of the ongoing issue that Arsenal in particular face regarding refereeing and officiating decisions. Moving on to Sverre Nypan, the Norwegian international. The battle of the journalists goes on. David Ornstein doubling down on his suggestions that Manchester City are not going to sign Sverre Nypan, that they are not interested in signing the 18-year-old midfielder. However, suggesting that Arsenal are advancing in talks with, of course, Rosenborg, the players' club, and on the player front as well. There was claims that Nypan was in London yesterday to suggest that he could be in talks with Arsenal after attending the Manchester City-Chelsea game as a guest of Erling Haaland yesterday. However, Fabrizio Romano has suggested that Arsenal, Manchester City, and Aston Villa have all presented proposals to Nypan to potentially sign the 18-year-old. We will wait and see what happens on this front. We will wait and see what goes down, and we'll wait and see how this story develops. I sincerely hope that Arsenal are successful in this situation because, as we know, he is a very, very talented and highly coveted player, and it would certainly be in the Arsenal first team. I think we can probably agree on that as well by the level that we're looking at him and the lack of depth that we currently have as a team as well. I think there is a good chance that he would be getting opportunities to play in the Arsenal first team this season already, based upon how thin Arsenal's squad is because of the injuries that they're having to deal with at the moment. Midfield is the area we probably got the most depth right now. But I still think there is a good chance that maybe we even see him play if Arsenal were to be successful in signing him during this season. And the final story remains with David Ornstein as well, because speaking to NBC, he has suggested, of course, that he gets the sense that Arsenal will indeed make a push for a striker, for a forward signing between now and the end of the window. He says, I think Arsenal will do something. That's my sense, because work is ongoing inside the club to bring in somebody that Arteta feels is the right one. And that's certainly the sense that I've had all window. It's certainly the information that I've been aware of all windows, that Arsenal are very active. Arsenal have been putting kind of the feelers out. Arsenal have been doing their due diligence to try and look for potential options. People are suggesting, of course, and I get it, people are frustrated. They're impatient. They are done waiting to hear about this. But the reality, of course, is where we are at right now is that Arsenal are doing everything they possibly can to try and find the right option, and it has to be the right option. They're not just going to sign anybody. I know you're sick and tired of me saying this, but for those that are in the back and have not heard this already, Arsenal are active, and Arsenal are not waiting until the last few days of the window to do something. It's not a case of waiting to right at the end in order to get that deal done. Arsenal are active and are constantly on the lookout and negotiating about potential deals on multiple fronts, and will only pull the trigger when they believe that the right player is in their potential grasp, and then will make that extra advanced step. That's just the reality. I'm sorry that that's the way that it's going, but that is the reality. If Arsenal don't do anything by the time the window closes, we can have a completely separate conversation about the ambition and about that money that is not being released or needs to be released, or how indeed Arsenal looked at those targets. But as the window remains open, that's where we are at. That's what's going on, and that's what we're going to have to continue to be hopeful of. But the sense is that Arsenal there are indeed making their ways and will indeed do something in the forward line between now and the deadline. Let's just hope that it is the right signing. That is all that we can hope for. Well, let's go to part two, shall we? Your questions and more right after this. Okay, let's jump to the chat box, shall we? Let's get some of people's thoughts, feelings, questions and queries before the end of today's show. Daniel reckons it's going to be Rashford that ends up being the player that Arsenal sign before deadline day. Of course, Rashford not in the Manchester United squad once again. Ruben Amorim was asked again about whether or not Marcus Rashford would be part of the plans or would be leaving, and he stayed very much true. In fact, I think he went a step further, arguably a step too far. He suggested that he'd be more inclined to put the goalkeeper coach in the squad if indeed they were training in the right manner over one of his players. I get the sense that Ruben Amorim has kind of come into the squad, has wanted to make his imprint, put his foot down, and we've seen Arteta do that with his squad, of course, as well, with players like Ozil, with players like Aubameyang. We didn't see it so early in his career. He certainly allowed kind of time to see if the players would respond to his methods. But Ruben Amorim has set a fine, firm line on this from the off, and it's as simple as that. Let's go to Mun, who says, despite having advanced technology and communications, English referees are among the most allegedly corrupt in the top European leagues. I'm doing you a favour. Michael Oliver consistently appears biased against Arsenal, allegedly. Ika Gang says, Howard Webb must step down now. Think that they're trying to point out our fan base is crazy and delusional. I never complained about referees, but I'm sick of Michael Oliver. Anthony says, I don't condone the level of abuse referees receive, especially towards their families. However, it's ironic that they want to be the victims, yet there is a clear notion that they have an agenda. Morning to Hadaverza in the chat. It's definitely singing Mr. Ornstein's praises this morning, of course, as well. Anthony says we're going to struggle for the rest of the season. Realistically, even if we sign Nypan, he is not ready for the Premier League and we should send him back on. I don't think I'd be sending him on loan at this half of the season. I'd probably be bringing him in and integrated him with the depth that we're lacking, of course, in the squad, but it's not a midfielder that is the main need that we've got during this window. Arsenal absolutely need to try and find that forward player. We know that's what we need. Let's just hope that we can do it. Ali says, why is it that the FA is okay with foreign players, foreign coaches, foreign owners, but not foreign referees? Well, it's not entirely true because, of course, Jared Gillett has been brought in from the Australian League. So it's not like it's entirely that they're against it. And they have, of course, brought in referees from other organizations. But I think there is a greater kind of issue about where most of the referees in the country at the top level have come from. Most of them are from up north, particularly the northwest. And I think that is something that needs to be looked into and to have a better representation across the league. And most of them are, of course, white men as well, which also is a problem because to find the best of the best, you need to be able to try and give opportunities to a wider diversity of people so that you can, over the long term, get the best potential options. Delt says, the PGMOL are partly responsible. You can't blatantly lie to a massive audience every week and expect immature members to react. I mean, at no point can you ever try and justify abuse. I'm sorry, but it just doesn't work that way. That's the wrong way to approach that argument. You need to condemn it. You need to call it out. You need to say how bad it is. You cannot make excuses for it. It is wrong. But at the end of the day, I'm not having that this is going to detract from the big problem that we need to continue our energy towards, which is highlighting, talking about the rather blatant inconsistencies and inadequacies that are going on amongst English refereeing and officiating. Tizer says, I get the feeling Arsenal are going all out for a specific target, and I will continue until the last minute of the transfer window before going to plan B. What do you think? As I think Jimenez is maybe gettable. Now, Arsenal will, of course, be not lowering their threshold of quality as their expectation. They will be going for it. GG says, what's wrong with white men? Now we're going down this road. It's just to talk about the diversity. Look at the pool of backgrounds of the officials that are in the Premier League right now. It is 90%, if not more, white men. And we need to make sure that there is a greater, broader, diverse range of people that are given opportunities at every aspect of these levels so that we can, in the end, have an even higher level of quality. That's the way forwards. Joseph says, any news on a phone-in show? We have to stay up late to catch the show live, so wondering when I might be able to do one. Probably after deadline day. That's when we are most likely to do it. Bradley says, in regards to Michael Oliver, it's a pattern of incompetence and probably alleged corruption. In regards to Arsenal, they need to look into it as the backlash will get worse, regardless of our pleas for calm. Lee also points out, if you look into Isak's stats compared to Havertz, they are not a million miles away from one another. It's just that killer instinct they're missing. And that killer instinct is a big, big problem, because that's the difference, of course, as well. Diavan Guru says, where is the proof of that abuse? Of course, people would like, I think, to be able to see the evidence as well, to be able to, that in a way is, if you're able to see the abuse, it's the way forward. I think to be able to show people that it exists, and I'm definitely in favor. Like we saw with the Havertz situation, and of course, Havertz's partner published that abuse, which highlighted it even more and got the attention on it that it deserved. And while it wasn't nice to see it, of course, I think it was the right thing to reveal it, and I think that will hopefully have led to some consequences, which, of course, we know from the recent arrest that was made in connection to some of those comments that we talked about in a show a few days ago. Gasha says, thoughts on Gomez getting a second yellow, but the Miles Lewis Skelly getting a straight red card. Again, it's another example of the inconsistency that's going on. AJ says, Tom, I have the solution. Use non-referees on VAR. I think it should be a third-party system as well. I'm in favour of this. I don't think those in charge of VAR should be officials in the Premier League. I think it should be officials from another organisation or another federation, or potentially, of course, those of a third-party platform, while also trying to maintain that level of, legitimacy that we need in the game in that pool as well. Ali says, referees are now trying to be a brand for life after refereeing. Look at Dean, for example. They don't make enough money as refs, which is a problem as well. Pay them more and hold them accountable. I think they still get a pretty decent wage, to be honest. I'll be very clear about that. I still think they're at that top level, at least, it is a well-paid gig. But I think that referees being put onto television programs, referees being interviewed on podcasts, as Anthony Taylor has, and referees, of course, being able to have previously gone abroad to do certain, escapades, if you will, and work abroad. It's not the best idea. I think you look at Mark Clattenburg, who's refereed a lot, of course, of like charity games in high-profile moments. They want to raise their profiles. They probably have people, in the background advising them on that, and that's not helped with things. So I think there should be a blanket ban on active Premier League officials, at least, doing any sort of media outside of matches. And I think post-careers, it's dangerous, I think, to start raising the profiles of referees that have been seen with the likes of Mike Dean, etc., as well. Cardi says, I put a comment in yesterday about the Scottish referees being of better quality than the English ones, but the football gods got me with that Rangers red card. Stu says, Tom, would you rather we sign a number 10 or a right wing in the summer, as Waneri seems to be better suited? Oh, a striker, 100%, mate. Sorry, I signed a 10. I think you can get a versatile forward, mate, to be honest. I think that's what would ultimately help us. But our primary is going to be a centre forward. I think a wide player is more likely during this transfer window. Manali says there was a meme going around suggesting violence towards referees. It wasn't nice, but flipping the narrative to be about the 0.1% of trolls is pure deflection by the PGMOL. It's not pure deflection. I absolutely understand why the deflection is being used, and I do empathize with that point of view, but it is also important to highlight that abuse when indeed it is present. But I think it's more important that we see it as well, and that evidence is also in many ways kind of sin at times. But it may be because there's investigations going on, it's evidence that you can't, of course, publish it, which does make sense. But we've seen action taken where evidence has been in the public domain as well. Akuma says, Tom, if possible, who or how can a governing body be set up to govern the PGMOL? Is it maybe UEFA's job to do that? Should there be greater scrutiny from third parties, from other organisations regarding refereeing? Probably there should be. It seems that they are a power unto themselves at times with very little scrutiny upon them and their doing. RRDM says, who would you consider the poll right player for us to sign before the transfer window closes? It's possible the club may not make any signings, so it's important to manage expectations. I don't know. I honestly haven't got a clue. I really don't think there is much regarding clarity on the individuals that is most likely to arrive at Arsenal in the public domain at the moment. Certainly not what are being talked about. Arsenal are keeping things very, very quiet, as you would expect them to do, because they want to give themselves the best chance of getting those deals done. And the best way to get those deals done is to keep them under wraps for as long as feasibly possible. I honestly don't know. You would put your money on maybe the likes of Sesko, of course, as well, who's been at the forefront of conversations. Mateus Cunha has also been mentioned a lot, but there is no obvious candidate with a week to go. Hopefully that changes, and hopefully we start to see some significant waves and moves made, and we will cover those as and when they happen. But as of right this very second, so far there is not an obvious candidate for Arsenal. We have just got to keep those fingers crossed that certainly changes in the coming days. And if it does, we will be talking about it. Right, let's end the show there. I mentioned it was going to be a quick one because I've got a lot to do today. I'm driving and then moving and then packing and then going on a flight tomorrow morning early to go to Spain. So lots going on. Have a fantastic rest of your Monday. I hope you have a really solid start to your week and that it all treats you very well indeed. I'll be back with you tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. with a special episode talking to a very familiar face who is a big Arsenal fan as well, who we've never had on the channel before, but a lot of you, maybe those more my age than those that are older, should recognize, especially if you're a bit of a gamer. Bit of a hint there. Have a fantastic day. Enjoy yourself. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.